A black lawyer walks into the courthouse and spots the police officer who mistreated him last week. The officer doesn't recognize him and displays the same degrading attitude. But 2 hours later in the courtroom, when the truth is revealed,
Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and a comment before we start to learn more about what happened.
the morning sun cast long shadows across the granite steps of the downtown courthouse. It was 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the building was already buzzing with the familiar rhythm of the justice system. Lawyers carrying briefcases, defendants nervously checking their phones, and police officers standing in small clusters, trading stories from the night shift. James Mitchell walked up those steps with the measured confidence of someone who belonged there. He was a tall, well-built black man in his late 30s, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit and carrying a leather briefcase that spoke of success and professionalism. His appearance was immaculate, his demeanor calm, but his eyes carried something else, a quiet intensity born from an encounter exactly 7 days ago that still burned in his memory. James was not just any lawyer. He was the newly appointed district attorney for the county, though his official swearing-in ceremony wasn't scheduled until later that afternoon. Most people in the courthouse didn't know him by face yet. His appointment had been announced only a week ago, and he had deliberately kept a low profile, using the transition time to observe the system he would soon be leading. What he had observed during that week had been both enlightening and deeply troubling. As James reached the top of the courthouse steps, he spotted a familiar figure standing near the metal detectors. Officer Derek Hartwell was leaning against the wall, laughing at something another officer had said. Hartwell was a stocky white man in his early 40s with a crew cut, and the kind of swagger that came from 15 years of believing his badge made him untouchable. He wore his uniform like armor, and his hand never strayed far from his belt, where his service weapon rested. James felt his jaw tighten as memories of last Tuesday night flooded back. He had been driving home from a late meeting, still wearing his suit, when Hartwell's patrol car lit up behind him. What followed was 45 minutes of humiliation, racial profiling, and barely concealed contempt. All because James had the audacity to be a black man driving a nice car in what Hartwell considered the wrong neighborhood. Hartwell had made James step out of the vehicle, conducted an aggressive search, questioned him about where he really worked, and suggested that his car was probably stolen. When James had calmly explained that he was an attorney and knew his rights, Hartwell had laughed in his face, saying, "Sure you are, and I'm the Pope. You people always have some story." The officer had ultimately let him go without a ticket. There had been no valid reason for the stop in the first place, but not before making it clear that he could make James's life difficult if he caused trouble. James had documented everything. He had names, badge numbers, timestamps, and a dash cam recording from his own vehicle. He had planned to address it through proper channels, but fate had just handed him a much more immediate opportunity. As James approached the security checkpoint, Hartwell glanced up and their eyes met for a brief second. There was no recognition on the officer's face, just a dismissive once-over before he returned to his conversation. James wasn't surprised. To men like Hartwell, all black men probably looked the same, regardless of how they dressed or carried themselves. James placed his briefcase on the conveyor belt and walked through the metal detector. It beeped, and Hartwell immediately stepped forward with an exaggerated sigh. "Empty your pockets," Hartwell ordered, his tone already confrontational. James remained calm. "I believe it's just my phone and keys. They're already in the tray." Hartwell stepped closer, invading James's personal space. "I'll be the judge of that. Empty your pockets. All of them." James complied, pulling out his wallet and placing it in the tray. Hartwell picked it up and flipped it open, examining the contents with unnecessary thoroughness. "James Mitchell," Hartwell read from the driver's license, his tone mocking. "That's supposed to mean something?" It's my name, James replied evenly. Hartwell smirked. Smart mouth. Where you think you're going all dressed up? Job interview? I have business in the courthouse. What kind of business? Hartwell's eyes narrowed. You got a court date? What did you do, shoplift that fancy suit? The other officers nearby had stopped their conversations, sensing confrontation. A few stepped closer, forming a loose semicircle. James recognized the dynamic immediately. Pack mentality, the unspoken code of backing up a fellow officer regardless of whether he was in the wrong. I'm an attorney, James said calmly. I have meetings this morning. Hartwell let out a harsh laugh. An attorney? Right. And I suppose you went to Harvard? The sarcasm was thick, and a couple of the other officers chuckled. Yale, actually, James replied, his voice still controlled. Law review. The mockery on Hartwell's face intensified. Listen here, pal. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you're in a courthouse. Making false claims about being an attorney, that's a problem. Maybe I should verify your story. Call someone who knows you. James felt the familiar burn of injustice, but he had learned long ago that losing his temper in situations like this only made things worse. That won't be necessary. May I have my belongings back? Hartwell held onto the wallet, flipping through it again. You got a business card in here? Some proof of this fancy legal career? I don't need to prove anything to you, James said quietly. I've passed through security. Unless you have a legitimate reason to detain me, I have business to attend to. Hartwell's face reddened. The other officers shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew this was escalating beyond a routine security check, but no one intervened. Legitimate reason? Hartwell stepped even closer. I'll tell you what's legitimate. You walk in here with an attitude, making claims about being some big-shot lawyer, and expect me to just take your word for it? I've seen guys like you before. All talk, no substance. Probably have a public defender waiting for you in some courtroom. James took a slow breath. Officer, I've been patient. I've complied with your requests. I've answered your questions. Now I'm asking you again. May I have my belongings? When I'm good and ready, Hartwell snapped. He turned to another officer. Martinez, run this name. See if he's got any warrants. Officer Martinez, a younger Latino officer who looked increasingly uncomfortable, hesitated. Sir, he's cleared security. If he's got business here. I said run the name, Hartwell barked. Martinez reluctantly moved to a nearby computer terminal. James stood still, his hands at his sides, maintaining his composure, even as the humiliation of being treated like a criminal in the very courthouse, where he would soon hold the highest prosecutorial authority in the county, burned through him. Derek, another officer, an older white man with gray hair, stepped forward. Maybe we should— Stay out of this, Collins, Hartwell cut him off. This is my checkpoint, my call. Collins exchanged a glance with James, and for a moment, James saw something in the older officer's eyes, recognition perhaps, or at least the awareness that this situation was wrong. But Collins didn't push further. The code of silence was too strong. Martinez returned from the computer. No warrants, no record, nothing. That doesn't prove anything, Hartwell muttered, but some of the certainty had left his voice. He thrust the wallet back at James. Fine. Go ahead, but I'm watching you. I see you around here causing problems. We're going to have words. James took his wallet and belongings, his face expressionless. Noted. As he walked away, he heard Hartwell mutter to the other officers, probably some ambulance chaser with a community college degree. They always think they're something special. James continued down the corridor, his outward calm masking the storm of emotions inside. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about every black person who had been subjected to this kind of treatment, every professional who had been assumed to be a criminal, every qualified individual who had been dismissed because of the color of their skin. He had a choice to make. He could file a formal complaint through proper channels, go through the lengthy internal affairs process, hope that something would come of it. Or he could do something more immediate, more impactful, more educational. James checked his watch. 9:15 a.m. His first official meeting as district attorney wasn't until noon, but he had a case to observe at 10:30, a routine prosecution case that Officer Hartwell was listed as the primary witness for. The pieces were falling into place in a way that felt almost like divine intervention. James made his way to the district attorney's office suite on the third floor. His secretary, Margaret, a sharp woman in her 50s who had worked for 3 DAs before him, looked up with a warm smile. "Mr. Mitchell, ready for the big day?" "Getting there, Margaret. Is the conference room available?" "All yours." Judge Hammond's clerk called. "Your swearing in is still set for 3 p.m. "Perfect. I need you to do something for me. Pull the file on the Bronson case, the one scheduled for courtroom 4 at 10:30. Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's just a simple possession case. Why?" "Just a hunch. I want to review it before the hearing." 20 minutes later, James sat in the conference room with the Bronson file spread before him. It was, as Margaret had noted, a fairly routine case. Possession of a small amount of marijuana. Defendant had no prior record, likely to plead out to a misdemeanor. But it was Officer Hartwell's testimony that would make or break the case. And as James read through the arrest report, his legal mind began to pick apart the narrative. The stop had been for a broken tail light. The search had been conducted based on suspicious behavior. The arrest had been made for resisting before the drug charge was added. It was textbook, legal on paper, but James knew the reality. He had lived it 7 days ago. How many others had Hartwell done this to? How many people had been arrested, charged, and convicted based on stops that were motivated by nothing more than racial profiling? At 10:25, James walked into courtroom 4 and took a seat in the back row. The public gallery was nearly empty. Just a few family members of the defendant and a couple of law students observing. Hartwell sat in the witness section, looking bored and checking his phone. The judge, the Honorable Patricia Chen, entered and everyone stood. The formalities began. The prosecutor, a young assistant DA named Thompson, who didn't know James by sight, called Officer Hartwell to the stand. Hartwell swaggered up, placed his hand on the Bible, and took his oath. He settled into the witness chair with the ease of someone who had done this hundreds of times. Thompson began the direct examination, walking through the basics of the stop. Hartwell answered with practiced efficiency, sticking to the script of his report. "And why did you initiate the traffic stop, Officer Hartwell?" "I observed the vehicle had a broken tail light, safety violation." "And what happened when you approached the vehicle?" "The driver, Mr. Bronson, appeared nervous. He was sweating, avoiding eye contact. Based on my training and experience, I recognized these as indicators of possible criminal activity." James made notes on a legal pad. The language was familiar, the same kind of subjective observations that gave officers wide discretion to escalate encounters. "Did you ask permission to search the vehicle?" "I did." Mr. Bronson initially refused, which increased my suspicion. When he finally consented, James stood up. "Objection, Your Honor." The courtroom went silent. Judge Chen looked up, confused. Thompson spun around. Hartwell's eyes landed on James, and for the first time, something flickered in his expression. Uncertainty. "Who are you?" Judge Chen asked. James walked down the aisle, his footsteps echoing in the quiet courtroom. "James Mitchell, Your Honor." I'm the newly appointed district attorney for this county. My swearing in is this afternoon, but I believe I have standing to address the court on a matter that directly impacts the integrity of this prosecution." The shock in the room was palpable. Thompson's face went pale. Hartwell's expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something approaching horror as the pieces fell into place. The man from the security checkpoint, the man from last week, was the district attorney. Judge Chen leaned forward, intrigued. "Mr. Mitchell, this is unusual. What's your objection?" James approached the bench. "Your Honor, I move to dismiss this case. The arrest was conducted by an officer with a pattern of racial profiling and misconduct. The search was likely not truly consensual, and the entire stop was pretextual." "That's outrageous," Hartwell burst out. "Your Honor, Officer Hartwell," Judge Chen's voice was sharp. "You'll have your turn. Mr. Mitchell, these are serious allegations. What evidence do you have?" "I have personal experience, Your Honor. 1 week ago, Officer Hartwell stopped me without cause, conducted an illegal search, and subjected me to racial profiling. I documented everything. And this morning, less than 2 hours ago, he detained me at the courthouse security checkpoint, questioned my credentials as an attorney, and made discriminatory remarks. I believe these incidents reveal a pattern that calls into question the validity of every arrest he's made." The courtroom erupted. Thompson was stammering protests. Hartwell had half risen from his seat, his face red. The defense attorney, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly saw an opportunity. Judge Chen banged her gavel. "Order. Everyone sit down and be quiet." She looked at James. "Mr. Mitchell, what you're suggesting has implications far beyond this case." "I'm aware, Your Honor. That's why I'm here. This isn't just about Mr. Bronson, though his case should absolutely be dismissed. This is about systemic problems in how certain officers conduct themselves and how those problems have been overlooked for too long." Hartwell found his voice. "He's lying. I don't even know this guy. He's making up stories to—" "Officer," James turned to face him directly. "Last Tuesday, October 15th, at approximately 11:35 p.m., you pulled me over on Riverside Drive. You claimed my car matched the description of a stolen vehicle, though you later admitted you had no such report. You made me step out of my car, conducted a search without probable cause, and when I identified myself as an attorney, you laughed and said, and I quote, 'You people always have some story.' You let me go without a ticket because you had no legal justification for the stop in the first place. I have the entire incident recorded on my dash cam." The color drained from Hartwell's face. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. James continued, addressing the judge. "And this morning, Officer Hartwell mocked my profession, suggested I was lying about being an attorney, and only released my belongings after another officer ran my name for warrants. All of this is witnessed by multiple officers at the security checkpoint and recorded on courthouse cameras." Judge Chen sat back, processing the information. "This is extraordinary. Mr. Thompson, what's your position?" The young prosecutor looked like he wanted to disappear. "Your Honor, I need time to investigate these allegations before the state proceeds." "Motion to dismiss is granted," Judge Chen said firmly. "Mr. Bronson, you're free to go. Officer Hartwell, I'm ordering an immediate review of all cases where you were the primary arresting officer. Mr. Mitchell, I assume Internal Affairs will be conducting an investigation?" "They will be contacted within the hour, Your Honor, along with the Civil Rights Division." Hartwell finally found his voice, but it came out strangled. "You can't. I was doing my job." James turned to him, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried through the entire courtroom. "Your job is to serve and protect all citizens equally. Your job is to uphold the law, not to use it as a weapon against people based on their race. Your job is to see every person you encounter as deserving of dignity and respect, regardless of how they look or where they're from. He stepped closer to the witness stand. I became a prosecutor because I believe in justice. Real justice, not the kind that depends on skin color or assumptions about who belongs where. For years, I've worked within this system, trying to make it better. And now I have the authority to demand better. James addressed the entire courtroom now. What happened to me happens to people every day. The difference is, I have a law degree, and I'm about to become the district attorney. Most people don't have that privilege. They suffer these indignities and carry on because they have no choice. But I do have a choice, and I choose to use my position to ensure that officers like Hartwell are held accountable. Hartwell slumped in his seat, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. His career was over. The cases he had built were now suspect, and the man he had humiliated twice was now his ultimate authority. Judge Chen looked at James with something approaching respect. "Mr. Mitchell, I look forward to working with you. This court is adjourned." As people filed out, James gathered his materials. The defense attorney approached him, gratitude evident in his expression. "Thank you. For my client and well, for standing up." James nodded. "It's what the job requires. Real justice for everyone." Hartwell remained in the witness stand, seemingly unable to move. James walked past him, then paused. "Officer Hartwell," James said quietly, "7 days ago, you had the power. You used it to humiliate someone you saw as beneath you. Today, the roles are reversed. But I'm not going to humiliate you. I'm going to do what the system is supposed to do, hold you accountable through proper legal channels. You'll have due process. You'll have fair treatment. Everything you denied to others." He started to walk away, then added, "I hope you learned something from this. I hope every officer who hears about this learns something. The badge doesn't make you superior. It makes you a public servant. Remember that distinction." James left the courtroom and made his way back to his office. By noon, the story had spread through the courthouse like wildfire. By 1 p.m., media requests were flooding in. By 2 p.m., the chief of police had called requesting a meeting. At 3 p.m., James stood before Judge Chen in her chambers, raised his right hand and took the oath of office as district attorney. The small room was filled with colleagues, friends, and a few reporters. But as James spoke the words, his mind was on the people who would never be in rooms like this, the people who faced officers like Hartwell every day without recourse, without power, without justice. "I do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution and to faithfully discharge the duties of the office of District Attorney with equal justice under the law." Equal justice. Those words meant everything. After the ceremony, as James stood accepting congratulations, Margaret approached with a message. "The chief wants to meet tomorrow morning, and Internal Affairs has already opened an investigation into Officer Hartwell." "Good," James said. "And Margaret, I need you to pull records on every arrest Hartwell has made in the past 5 years. Every traffic stop, every search, every charge. We're going to review them all. That's going to be hundreds of cases. I know. Get me a team. This is priority 1. As the sun set over the courthouse, James sat in his new office, looking out at the city he had sworn to serve. His phone buzzed with messages, congratulations from colleagues, interview requests from media, and a text from his wife asking how his first day had gone. He thought about how to answer that. Eventful, certainly. Dramatic, absolutely. But also necessary, because change doesn't happen by waiting. It happens when people with power choose to use it for justice, when they refuse to let indignities pass unanswered, when they stand up, not just for themselves, but for everyone who comes after them. James Mitchell had walked up those courthouse steps that morning as a man carrying the memory of humiliation. He left that evening as the district attorney, carrying the responsibility of making sure such humiliations would not be so easily inflicted again. The system wasn't perfect, it never would be. But today it had moved one step closer to the justice it promised, and tomorrow the real work would begin.